Anatomy of a Pyramid. You are listening to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons and monsters and serpents. This is Brothers of the Serpent podcast, and we are coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, where we are nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed high atop the Edwards Plateau. This is a special episode. Normal, special episode. So Kyle has been working on this presentation for, I don't know, like what, 3 or 4 months now?
Yeah, I guess.
And so this is, we're just slowly adding to our repertoire of presentations that we can give at various conferences and meetups and everything. And so far, I've done all the work. So Kyle is building, and he's made this fantastic presentation that we are going to go through on the show today. I think the first time we're going to give it is going to be, let's see, we're going to do it
on the 16th.
We're going to do some time traveling. It will have been...
That's right.
In our future, but in your past, given at the afternoon at the museum. And then later maybe in Egypt. We'll see. But now, we'll have this presentation that's really good. So, do you want to give a little background on this? What made you decide to do this? Where did this come from?
The last trip we took to Egypt in February of this year, we went to Abu Awash for the first time.
Oh, yeah.
And that is it's part of the presentation, but that's the pyramid that, the lost pyramid, quote unquote, that basically they thought had never been finished. And it's this big trench in the ground and a pit. And seeing that, it just dawned on me, what is going on in many of the subterranean chambers of various pyramids. And another aspect of it was the primordial mound, which I talked about a lot on that tour, right? As the idea slowly developed, I ended up talking more about that and then looking at other pyramids with this idea in mind. And it completely sort of, I guess it was like a revision of this idea of pyramid construction in my mind that had taken place. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. So, when we got back, we had agreed to try to make more presentations and do that, use the presentation format as to make produced videos of the show. So I was like, all right, I'm going to do it. And, the thing is that I think is funny about this presentation though, is how it's very generic. I started out just getting too busy on the first slide, trying to format stuff and, what text do I want or whatever.
Oh yeah.
And then I was like, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
I'm going to make it real freaking generic. And I just used the default text. And I used everything default, just with a blank, format. And, I made the entire presentation like that. So it's
it's super fancy, folks.
Yeah, it's real fancy. Okay, before we get started though, we just finished bottling the first 2023 reds that we're releasing. Yeah. So they will be released on Christmas or roughly around the end of the year, basically, maybe a New Year's release. And so we brought one of the castaways, which is usually the beginning or the end of the run. Yeah. Or the middle, or the between switching. Yeah. Switching wines. Whatever. Yeah. So this might have some Tanat in there. So yeah, this is the 2023 Montepulciano, and a big shout out to Solid Luigi in the Discord. Troy, who does the episode art, has been working with us on the labels. There are fine lines in there that is really not coming through on the camera, but it's actually the topo map. You can see that, the topo over the entire label. It looks really cool. Very elegant. Yeah. So we're gonna open that right now to kick this thing off. There, we're breaking the cardinal rule of podcasting. Don't drink wine starting at the beginning of a podcast. Yeah, we've had this rule for
for 7 years, ladies and gentlemen. Ever since
episode 1.
That definitely didn't happen. When Kyle drank an entire bottle of wine and said, "We are not publishing that."
But if we're sharing it,
Because by the end, he was like, "This is fucking pyramids. Don't make any sense."
and it was a big bottle too. It was a 1 liter.
Yeah, you had a.
It's a 750 milliliters. Look
Yeah.
at this cork.
There you go.
Printed cork.
Yeah,
Fancy pantsy.
fancy.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Libations of the gods.
All right.
Excellent.
Cheers, man.
Cheers. Oh yeah,
Very nice.
that Monty is good.
Hadn't started bottle shock yet.
No, it hasn't.
Ah, that's good. Hopefully it never does it. And then we can release it whenever we want.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well,
Let's go.
without further ado, here we go. Pyramid construction. So this is my
perfect.
It's very generic.
Well, you got a shadow.
I
on
actually put a shadow on it. Yeah. I did come back and fancy it up a bit.
it. All right.
But
Last time I saw this, ladies and gentlemen, was just white text, no shadow.
I like it.
It looks good.
Okay, so this is not about how they built the pyramids, but it's about a process. And I think that understanding that process is really important. And basically, by understanding what was done, we can eventually begin to piece together how they did it and then maybe why. So that's the point of this, is to kind of go through these processes that have become apparent after seeing the various different stages of pyramid building.
But I think that like what you said there, that's like a key insight. You know, first we have to know what was done,
Yeah.
right? And one of the things about these pyramids is they're so enormous that most of it is just not visible. Like you can't even, how can you start to
Exactly.
figure out how they built it when we don't know what it actually looks like structurally on the interior?
That's right.
So that's great. Now, I don't know if figuring those two things out will lead to why.
I don't know if it will either.
But it's
going to
much
get you
more
closer.
likely to lead to why. Yeah,
Exactly.
All right.
Okay, so this is a pyramid. In case anyone didn't know, this is the Great Pyramid of Giza. Actually, everyone knows this is a pyramid. It's obvious. It is a giant triangle made of stone, but it's actually incomplete. And I know most of you, or pretty much all of you, know that it's incomplete, but it's crazy how incomplete this pyramid is. There's supposed to be around, I've seen a couple of different numbers, 144,000 to 200,000 casing stones were once on this pyramid.
144,000.
Yeah, I like that number.
Yeah.
I like that number. But obviously the casing stones were quarried off of it. Some people say it was natural disaster that initially destroyed them. But it's pretty obvious that they were quarried. And at 200,000 casing stones, they were estimated to be around 15 tons a piece. That's between, if you go with the smaller number, 144,000, or maybe a little bit lighter weight or something, you're dealing with like 1 to 3 million tons of stone have been removed from this object, from this artifact. 1 to 3 million tons. It's insane. So yeah, it's not actually a pyramid anymore, right? It is so incomplete. So I just think that's an interesting point. And I mean, this thing is so massive that you can remove 3 million tons of its parts. And it's still totally obvious what it was, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just crazy. So we'll go through a couple of different examples here.
I wonder if it's like similar to, like, for example, a skyscraper. If you just took out all the glass, it might be, I don't know if it'd be millions of tons,
right?
But a skyscraper, you know, the glass ones,
yeah,
it's still obviously a skyscraper, but there's just no glass in the windows anymore. Right. And you might say like, well, it's missing 1 million pounds of material or whatever, but it's still an obvious skyscraper, right? It's a lot of stuff that's gone.
Right.
And that stuff protects it.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we'll go through a few of these. This is the bent pyramid. It's obviously different than the Great Pyramid. It has multiple angles. There's some giant triangles on it, but there's also giant trapezoids. This is actually one of my favorite pyramids because of how many casing stones still remain on it. It's fantastic to see it, and we'll go into it a little bit more detail. We've got the step pyramid. It's quite a different design as well. And we'll learn a little bit more about the step pyramid too. It's not actually a true pyramid, and we'll get into that more later. It was not initially designed to be a pyramid, but it later turned into one. This is also a pyramid, the Pyramid of Lahun. And that may not actually be obvious to everybody that sees it, that this was a pyramid, but it was made, its core masonry was mud brick. So it was still cased in hard stone, like limestone, much harder than mud brick. But again, when the casing was excavated or quarried away, the rest of the core masonry has just been melting into these giant piles of scree that you see down below. But yeah, this is, in the same sense, a pyramid, just as much as the Great Pyramid of Giza. This is also a pyramid, the Pyramid of Maidum, but it looks more like a tower or a ziggurat, right? Like that. Yeah. I always think of the Tower of Babel when I see this thing. And yeah, initially when we went to Egypt, I had never looked into these. I had no idea this thing was a pyramid. This one's also not considered to be a true pyramid. It started as something else, and we'll get more into that later. But yeah, this one's quite fascinating. It actually has the same, in its finished state, it had the same angles as the Great Pyramid of Giza. What is it, 51 degrees, something or other?
Yeah, something like that. I don't remember the exact numbers.
It's basically that gives it the pi ratio.
I see you've been studying the Marty technique. We're going to get to that.
We are going to get to that. This is just a quick run through, of how so many different things that don't look like pyramids actually are. This is Kent Kawas.
This one's really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. This is almost all bedrock that you see here. Yeah, they've cut this bedrock into these slope. I mean, that would have been a steep, very steep pyramid. You can see that it's cased on the left side, and the casing stones basically butt right up against the bedrock. So, I wonder if that angle was consistent all the way to the top. It would have been quite steep, I would imagine.
It would have been.
I'd like to get the angle of that casing. I've never measured it. And then finally, this is Abu Rawash. I don't actually have a good overall picture of Abu Rawash, and I couldn't find one online either. This is mostly what's left.
It's difficult to take a good picture of it. I mean,
yeah. But this is also a pyramid that we're looking at. And who would have guessed that, right? People obviously that studied in Egypt figured it out, but this is not a presentation for people who've studied in Egypt. So finally, we have gas station pyramids. These are some of my favorite. You will not break the law if you climb these pyramids, but they do exist in Egypt.
And they are pyramids.
And they are very obviously pyramids, and they are missing nothing. Okay, so what are the elements that we're going to be looking at? I wanted to kind of categorize this into it could have been called the anatomy of a pyramid, because that's kind of the way I look at it. The main elements we're going to focus on are the finish, the casing, core masonry, the superstructure, which is like the shape of that you saw at the at My Doom, that internal structure. We're going to go through many of those. Bedrock shaping, which is like the Kent Kawas pyramid, how they cut the bedrock. And then I didn't really know where to put chambers and passages because I kind of wanted to arrange these from the outside in, which is sort of the way I went from imagining pyramids, is like the outside giant triangle.
Yeah.
And then slowly learning like, oh, they were cased.
Yeah.
Like, and they were flattened, they were finished. And then, you know, so you kind of start to realize, okay, I know the difference between casing stones and core masonry. And then eventually you start to see the pyramids like Kent Kawas or My Doom that have this core masonry has even been stripped away. So it's kind of like the anatomy. We're going from the outside in, and yet chambers and passages are sort of part of every aspect of the pyramid. But everybody talks about the chambers and passages in their pyramid presentations. So in fact, you know what? We're not even going to do that.
I mean, a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Because the chambers and passages have to pass through the casing. The chambers and passages are how we see some of the stuff you're going to show. Right. But yeah, for the most part,
we're not going into detail.
If you want to know about chambers and passages, just look at other stuff.
We're only going to talk about them as they apply to these other aspects. Okay. So we'll start with the finish. And again, we're at the bent pyramid here. And this is the most finished and completed pyramid you will see in Egypt. Again, it has a lot of its casing stones remaining, and they are finished. They are flattened.
What do you think that guy with the truck was doing there? Maybe he's gonna move it a little bit.
He's gonna push the pyramid a little bit.
Can you just like yeah? Sorry.
Yeah, I got to shout out to Ben for giving me this video. I actually, we've been here multiple times, but I was mostly taking photos, and I really love this video. Look at he's going up to the corner, and you can see there's the socle where the corner actually reached the bedrock. And he's standing right at it.
Yeah, look at that.
Bam.
God.
I mean, can you imagine the magnificence of these things when they were in their complete state with a complete finish? Yeah, it's just, it's mind blowing. So I think, you know, again, we're not talking about the purpose of it or why, but I just can't help imagine that the finish it's such an aesthetic and like aesthetically pleasing aspect.
Yeah.
And it was just so well done. Like the way the corners are done is just, it's so impressive. Much more so than, you know, seeing core masonry stacked up.
Yes, that's right.
So I can't help but think that there was definitely, you know, this was just like the finisher's touch.
Yeah.
The artist, you know, something about that. I don't know. It's like, we're going to do this and it's just going to blow your mind when it's done.
And they used higher quality stone.
Yes.
The blocks are generally bigger.
Yes. So this is Menkaure, which we've talked a lot about in unfinished. And this is the unfinished presentation. And this is an unfinished or a finished section of a mostly unfinished wall. What is the standard model of this idea? They thought that there was a temple butted up here and they just had finished that one wall. I've heard multiple things
there's
about
multiple
it.
different things. I mean, I'm not sure if they thought there was a temple abutment against the north face here.
Yeah.
But yeah, they clearly cleared this around the entrance, and then that the blocks were stacked 17, maybe 19 courses high based on where there's one remaining granite stone.
Yeah.
That they don't think the whole thing was cased in granite. There's a ton of granite laying all around it. And I'm not sure that they actually think it's unfinished either.
Yeah.
Like that's
That's what I had heard. But
Yeah.
my supposition is that it's absolutely unfinished. And I think obviously that's yours as well.
Yeah.
I think that it's clear based on every other pyramid that we can look at that has that still has remaining casing stones, that the finish work was intended to be complete around the entire surface of the pyramid.
Yeah.
And I think we will be able to show that. But just a little bit more on Menkaure. I think that this finish work is a key aspect of creating the doorways, which we know existed in the casing themselves, right? They had to finish in order to have these swinging doors. With this bulk of stone sticking out like this, you wouldn't be able to get the door hinge to hinge properly, or it would have been too obvious or something like that.
Yeah.
So the finishing of it, the flattening of it, allows for a stone to act as a door and swing out and also up or in without being noticeable from the outside. Here's just one of my favorite pictures on this this area of Menkaure. How much stone they were actually willing and regularly removing to create the finish. I mean, it's a massive amount of stone that they were removing to get that flattened surface.
Yeah. 12 to 18 inches there.
Yeah, at least. Yeah.
Yeah.
And here I'm looking at unfinished and finished work, giving a presentation on finish, while Russ is down there giving a presentation on unfinished in Egypt. So yeah, just some more pictures of the finish work here. It's a fascinating site. This is around the east face, which also has a finished section in the middle. However, there seems to be no door on this face, and I just wanted to show this one just because of that one block. That is one stone there in the middle that goes from being finished to unfinished, and it's just a massive casing stone.
And just because the scale isn't really clear in this picture, you can walk along the top there and step out onto it.
Yeah.
There's plenty of room
It's
to
a
walk
walkway. Yeah.
on top of that massive block there where it hasn't been cut away or hasn't been flattened. That area is plenty wide for a walkway.
Yes.
So it's amazing. Like in this picture, you can't really see the scale.
Yeah.
It'd be great to get one of somebody standing up there.
Yeah. I probably have more. I probably could have some, but I just, okay. So this is finished work in limestone. This is one of the satellite pyramids next to the Great Pyramid. This is the casing finished at the base, and you can see some wear and tear from, just time, maybe wind and sand erosion. And there's some chiseling there at the bottom, like that one was not quite finished. The wind and sand erosion is up higher, but there's like a smooth area there. So the point is, like, we see this finished work on so many areas and in so many different states of destruction or completion. That's the satellite pyramid also. Partial finish work there you can see at the bottom in the casing stones. And a lot of it is eroded away, and it looks to be also unfinished.
Yeah.
Like it was never completed. This looks like a incomplete casing stone on the corner there, and you can see some other ones that are not finished flat. And we'll look at some more like this one. These were clearly intended to be finished, since there are other finished stones down on this course. And then we've talked about these before. These are the nubs on the blocks, the casing blocks at the base of this satellite pyramid that were clearly finished at one point. The
For
nubs
some other
themselves.
projects, yeah.
And we've talked about how this is, I think that most likely they were the lids to boxes, big limestone boxes.
It does look like
that were repurposed. And you can see the finish work has already begun. The chipping away of the corners, right? In these big chunks, they're chipping the corners away in big chunks. And then eventually when they get down closer to what is supposed to be the finished surface, then they'll start doing the fine work. And look, there's Chris. He's really feeling up those two nubs right there. This is the Red Pyramid, finished limestone casing coming all the way down to the bedrock, which is also finished. You can see here, that's the bedrock. And the socle, essentially, has been finished. It's got a flat surface there, and then it's beveled away. So the finish is the bedrock, the tiling, and the casing stones all the way up the pyramid. All the way across. So here's some more finish work at the Red Pyramid. And you can see it's clearly been heavily eroded by wind and sand or whatever. Erosive processes. I'm not a geologist. And then you can see in the background there, this massive pile of debris from the quarrying of the casing material, which is covering more finish work. Like this is what that material was also where this guy is standing at some point, and it was excavated. Most of it, or many of these pyramids were excavated by Petrie initially so that he could get his measurements. Again, we have finished casing stones at the base of the Great Pyramid. And you can see that they butt right up against finished tile. But these are just finely wrought stones. They're limestone, a hard or silica-rich form of limestone, Tura limestone. Tura is a place that's nearby. But you can see the tile stones there where they're finished right up to them.
And the tiles... The casing stones are actually sitting on little upraised platforms on the tiles, right? That's another wild thing to me is that they tiled this whole thing, but then the area where the pyramid is sitting on is a little bit raised above or it looks like that. It might have been worn down over time.
It could have been worn down, but there, I went down a long rabbit hole on the variation in the socle, like the actual I don't know what you call it, elevation differences in the socle from one corner to another are like really big. And they would sometimes case all the way down to like the lower, on this corner, the socle's way lower. So they would case way down, then they would tile over the casing.
Oh.
So the tiles in some cases, so here's the casing angle, the tile stone would sit on top of the bedrock down here against the casing stone and make the same level as this back corner that was cased right down to the bedrock. So the pyramid actually isn't quote unquote level unless you consider the tiling, which was the original, what was considered to be the base level of the pyramid was where the tiles ended on one end and where the bedrock was on the other.
Okay.
So the tiling made it level.
Yeah.
But the course, right? The course was level all the way around.
Yeah.
It's just, anyway.
That's wild.
Yeah, it's... That Petrie drew diagrams of it, and there's like a half of a diagram in one of these slides. I can show you. So here's some more casing stones around the Great Pyramid, and these are heavily eroded, I think, by wind and sand because of the lateral style of erosion. It's not fissured vertically like the Sphinx enclosure.
Yeah.
It's lateral, like there was sand sitting on the ground, right underneath that lip, and there was just sand blowing up against it. It was slowly eating it away, and at multiple levels, obviously. It was doing this over ages.
And you can see the size of the casing stones, even though they're so heavily eroded. You can see the size of them relative to the core masonry that they're sitting next to, right? They're large.
Definitely much larger than core masonry.
Also, remember, I don't know if that's what we're looking at here, that it looks like there's an angle change right at the bottom of the casing stones, like it kind of tilts. You see that? Little tilts down?
Mm-hmm.
Now, that may be an artifact of the erosion.
I think so, yeah.
But remember that... Is it the
satellite pyramid where we looked
and Khafre, the granite ones come down and they have a definite lip.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like so that it doesn't make a sharp corner that can easily break, right?
Right.
There's this lip.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't need to skip to it. I'm sure we'll see it at some point.
Yeah, the sharp corner, like that was illustrated at the red pyramid that I showed of the limestone coming down to meet the bedrock. I meant to mention that. Absolutely. It has a really sharp corner. You see it's kind of chipped away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, we'll see some at the middle pyramid, Menkara, they have a bevel.
Khafre,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's look at those.
Oh, that's the next slide. Okay.
Yeah. These are the middle pyramid, Khafre casing stones. They're obviously granite. And you can see in the picture on the left there, they're fitted up against the core masonry in the back. And it's crazy. Like, it's not flat. Like, the core masonry back there is actually, it's like the granite was cut to fit the core masonry.
Yeah.
Which is strange because the core masonry is limestone, so much easier to cut.
It's weird.
Or did they like make those pieces of limestone so that they didn't have to flatten the back of the granite? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I just don't think so. I think that they just whatever. I don't know. Very interesting. There's all these slots that are cut into this granite is the attempts to quarry flat square pieces of granite off of these blocks. So that's intentional destruction.
What do you think about the patches on the faces there? Doesn't it look like it's spalling away?
Yeah, it's spalling away for sure. And
it's like there was a finished surface, but that finished surface is kind of coming off of it. It's weird, right?
Yeah. And we saw in many cases that the areas of granite pillars that were buried in sand their finish had completely spalled off.
Yeah.
And then when you looked up top where they were sticking out of the sand, they were still fine.
Yeah.
So, was it just because this was buried or was this from the tumbling down of other blocks above and hitting it and just cracking it and therefore letting moisture in and eventually it spalls off? I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe all of the above.
Right.
But like Russ was pointing out, right here is a bevel. So they did not flatten or they didn't finish that casing down to a fine corner like they did in the limestone. And I wonder, limestone, it seems, would chip away easier than this granite. So maybe the granite's more difficult to work. So maybe it breaks easier with the sharp corner
That's
like
what I'm
that.
thinking. It's also generally large grain granite.
Yes.
So maybe it's difficult to get it down to such a sharp point.
Yeah.
Well, although they did it in other features, like remember those incredibly fine ridges on the fluted columns, fluted granite columns, and this like perfect sharp
corner.
Yeah,
it's true.
So,
but I think it was a wise feature.
I agree
to put that because it is at the base, and things hit it, or it's going to receive the most damage.
Yeah, people are going to back their truck
and they
up into
they beveled it like this instead of bringing it down to that real sharp corner.
Yeah,
which would have immediately begun to chip away. And maybe the contrast of like the dark granite against a white limestone would have been, you would have just started noticing this chipping like so much easier.
Yep.
I
think it looks good with the bevel on there.
I agree. And I used to think that little granite pyramid that Yusuf gave me from his shop that had the flat bevel on the end, I was like,
this is crap. It's not
You know what? It's correct.
It's correct. That's right.
Okay. Moving on. So we're walking around the middle pyramid at Khafre's pyramid, and just looking at other finished granite blocks. These are just laying there. So you can tell just from all this debris laying around, there's a lot of finished surfaces, beveled surfaces on this granite. And there's still a bunch of casing stones still in situ. Many of them have been broken and destroyed, but there's another bevel. And so that was one of the key, the ideas that we realized, like, man, we can walk around Menkara and look for beveled, finished stones on the other two faces. And sure enough, we found multiple of them.
We did.
So I think it's clear at Menkara, at least, that they beveled, or they finished a square in the center of each face. I think this is part of the finishing process. They finish a square in the middle of each face of the pyramid and use that small square as a measuring point,
survey point,
a survey point to complete the flattened angle all the way across the surface of the pyramid.
And that's a good point. That you asked earlier. Did they think there was a temple there by the north side? No one is arguing that there's a temple on every side of that pyramid.
East, yeah, but the east side has a temple butted right up against that flattened area.
It's just it's offset from it though. That's what's weird, right? Like the flattened area, and then the place where the temple walls actually encounter the structure of the pyramid itself is off to the north of where that flattened area is. That's true. But I definitely heard that they thought that they flattened that area because it would have been inside the temple room or something, and you would have seen a flat. That's right. Yeah,
I think it's bunk.
Yeah,
and it kind of goes to your point that you thought that the temple was a later addition.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And they didn't put it where the entrance is because the entrance is over there. The entrance
was there. So it's a later addition, and yet the limestone of that temple is so heavily eroded that it must have been
there a long time. Yeah.
Very interesting, folks. Yeah. See, this is why we need a sequence of events in the pyramid construction.
Yes.
You don't need to know why. You just need to know the sequence of events, and it will give you more clues as to what was really going on. Okay. This is a fascinating walk. I love this walk around this pyramid. It's awesome. But
you can sit there and study every fragment. Every single one of them has a story to tell.
Yeah. And the tiles too. Like they've cleared this bedrock. These are humongous tiles that we're walking on here. Anyway. Okay. So finished work. To sum up, it is definitely a design feature of every pyramid.
Yeah.
Like the quote unquote pyramid design. It was the entire exterior, not little squares.
Yeah.
You find finished work in various stages of completion and also in various stages of damage and erosion. All right?
Yeah. And sometimes the finished work is just gone.
It's completely gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's part of the various stages of erosion and damage.
Oh, okay. You're right.
The variation goes from all the way to
damaged 100%.
Yes.
To slightly eroded. Okay. You're right.
Yeah. Okay. So now we'll talk about casing. We're back at Menkaure, and this is like the greatest example of how the casing arrives and is placed on the pyramid. I think that we can find.
Yeah.
This bulky, pillowy aspect of the stone was, I think a feature of the method of quarrying. It seems to me, because at the quarry there are pillowy features, like the negative of pillowy features in the quarry.
Yeah.
So it's clearly a feature of the quarrying style, and it was left protruding or excess material left, at least on what was going to be the exterior of the pyramid to protect the eventually finished surface from damage during construction. So this is like, don't paint the house until you're done putting up the siding.
Exactly.
Right? You don't paint the board and then nail it to the wall and then paint the next board and nail it. It's like, you need to paint the siding all at once because you're going to scratch it. Your ladder's leaning up against it, whatever it is. So this is what they were doing.
Although there was one job I did where I really wish we'd have painted it before we put it up there.
Yeah. Yeah. These stones, again, like Russ had mentioned before, the casing stones are also massive. Like they're much larger. Even some of these ones that are narrow, they go in like, 8 feet in some cases to meet the core masonry. They're very deep.
Yeah.
They're huge stones. So much larger stones than the core masonry, much harder material than the core masonry. Even in the limestone examples, that limestone on the exterior is much harder than the core masonry. And we'll see. Again, we got to go and look at the bent pyramid. This is,
the best one.
Yeah. It has the most casing stones left over and finished as well. look at the size of these. I mean, this overhang is massive. And the casing stones continue in. Like you look at the
what would you say? How the depth of that overhang? 6-8 feet?
Oh yeah, I got some pictures of of us. Let's see here. There's people underneath. I mean, you could live.
Yeah, there you go.
You could live under this thing.
Yeah.
Right. Now you look at the stone's face, and it's very small in comparison to its depth. Right. Yep. It's the same thing with the pyramid in Menkaure. They go way in.
Yeah.
I would just point out that the casing stones on the Great Pyramid were said to be 15 tons, while the average stone size, which would be the core masonry, pretty much makes the majority of the average, are 2.3 tons.
Average stone weight of the core masonry is 2.3.
Yeah, while the casings are around 15.
Yeah, and it's because most of the time, the smallest face on the casing stones is the outward facing one, and obviously the one in the back. Right, the other four sides are much larger. So it's like a hidden size.
Yes.
Yeah.
Another interesting feature about the casing stones, at least at the bent pyramid, is that they're angled in towards the structure. So the camera is level, and I'm looking at at a side-on view of the casing stones, and you can see how the joints are all angled towards the body of the pyramid. There's a story told that like maybe the reason why the bent pyramid has most of its casing stones left over is because of this feature. Like the people who were trying to quarry it and pull them out couldn't get them because they were trying to drag them uphill. I don't think that that's true. Maybe I don't know why that this pyramid.
I do think it would have made it more difficult, but not impossible.
I think what would have made it much more difficult on this particular pyramid is the steepness.
Yes.
The
lower
steep.
slope is very steep.
Yeah.
You're right.
So I think that's why.
And also it's remote.
It's quite remote.
Yeah.
Compared to Giza. But I mean, there's other remote pyramids like Maidum. It's just like completely destroyed.
Yeah.
The most remote pyramid is like completely gone. Abu Rawash, the northernmost. But but
that one's at the top of it. Everything's downhill from there.
Abu Rawash also has casing stones that are angled in towards the mass.
That's right.
And they're almost all gone.
I mean, almost the entire pyramid is
That's
gone.
what I mean. Yeah. So I don't think that was the reason why the casing material wasn't mined off of this. That's just a side point.
It is a good point, because
the point is that the feature, a noticeable feature of this casing is that it's angled, whereas the core masonry is not. The core masonry is flat.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. An interesting design feature.
Yeah, imagine like making sure that I guess maybe they weren't, I don't know, I'd have to look at it. Were they concerned at having the same number of casing courses as they do core masonry courses?
We will get to that.
Okay.
That is, yes, generally speaking, they made the casing the same thickness as the course.
But in this one, they're all, so you have to make sure that the tilt begins at the core and then goes up, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But in some cases, hey, the casing would complete two courses of core masonry, right?
Okay.
Not a fraction.
Not a fraction, but
it was either one hole or two hole, but not a fraction.
Always a whole number.
A hole.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so this is the Pyramid of Unas.
All right, well, those are definitely not
These
one
are
course.
Huge.
Yeah.
Casing stones. I would like to point out the casing stones in the front. Look at how much larger they are than the core masonry.
Yeah.
And I know there's going to be some guy in the comments like the core masonry is far away. Okay, guy in the comments.
Yes, they are.
but no, these are really much larger. And then there's some that have been rebuilt. You can see kind of like little brick lines in some of those where they're the antiquities department is like fixed the edge to keep them from breaking and crumbling. Here's more of them. And this time you can see core masonry under the tiling closer than the casing stones. Guy in the comments. They're just so much smaller. These casing stones are massive and beautiful. And again, this is limestone. And the casing material, it's like, it's still got a beautiful finished face, while the core masonry above is just coming apart.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it's more of a hill than a pyramid.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is in Saqqara. I'm just showing you. There's the step pyramid over there. This is the pyramid of Unas just
Those
nearby.
things must have been protected. They must have been buried.
I'm sure they were buried, yeah. But still, they were buried in like giant stones, and they still look pretty nice.
They look good, yeah.
Yeah. This is also, I just love this picture. This is a casing stone that Russ is leaning against. A casing stone.
Yeah.
It's cracked in multiple places now, but originally they laid this stone. It was one piece.
Over the door.
And it's over the door. This is something we'll look at as a part of the design. In some cases, the casing or the courses of core masonry over the door had to be a particular way, right? So this is almost like a lintel.
Yeah.
Stone over the entrance, which in this one is strange that the entrance is actually in the ground outside the pyramid.
Yep.
I didn't really look into the history of Unas. It's possible that it's not a true pyramid. It could have been like a mastaba that was like built upon.
Yeah.
Just in case anyone's wondering, I did not have a ticket. Okay. So there's the casing wrap up. They are larger stones, harder materials. It's actually a protective layer, like a roof material. It was more valuable. It was a valuable material, which is why it was quarried away, and they've been mostly removed.
Yeah.
And now we are going to look at core masonry, which is this is cool. I initially was thinking like this is going to be a short segment because, you know, what are you going to say? Here's a bunch of core masonry. It's just random limestone. It's of varying qualities. They don't even care if like the strata lines are horizontal or vertical. There's multiple stones in here with vertical strata, which you wouldn't get if these were geopolymer people.
That's true.
So there's also a lot of mortar involved. I mean, most of these stones are pretty well fit together, but there are places where there's quite a bit of mortar, ancient mortar, which is that would be really strange if you were a geopolymer expert and you were pouring your casings or your core masonry and you were like using mortar.
Yeah. Yeah.
To weld
your geopolymers
together.
Quite fit. You need to pour some more geopolymer in there.
So definitely not geopolymer. There's macrofossils. There's, ammonites. There's
giant chunks of flint.
There's all kinds of like shells and things inside these stones that you can clearly see with the naked eye. So they're definitely not ground up into powder and then glued together. But yeah, the core masonry, it makes up the vast majority of this construction job. Here's just a short video of some of the mortar that you'll find in between two of the core masonry stones. And it's interesting too that in a lot of cases the mortar is harder than the limestone. Like the limestone is eroded away and the mortar's sticking out.
Yeah, yeah.
Like inches.
I've wondered about that because we've seen examples in some of the passageways that these thin places between the stones will fill up with a crystalline accretion.
Yeah.
And like, is it possible that some of this stuff on the outside of these pyramids that we think is mortar is actually like, you know, a growth rather than a mortar? And that's why it's harder because it's actual crystal?
Possibly. I didn't look into it much, but it seems like there's a consensus at least that like there's a ton of mortar.
Okay.
In the core masonry.
Okay.
Petrie wrote about it. Like, he seemed pretty knowledgeable on crystallization and all that kind of stuff too.
Yeah.
I just don't know. I haven't personally looked into it. But I did see.
Well, God damn it. Get out of here.
I know.
Don't come back.
There's a lot more to be done here. I did see a lot of joints that had like a considerable amount of mortar that was like a different color, and it's
Wow.
always this sort of brown
Are
color.
you running?
That we're driving in the bus right now.
Okay. How did you do this?
So much masonry. So yeah, these coarse thicknesses are of particular interest, and we're going to go and listen to old Flinders Petrie here. He did a lot of excavations on Giza in the 1800s, actually all over Egypt. He excavated a whole lot of pyramids, and got down to their corner. I mean, they were buried in this rubble, so he got down to the corners, and he was able to take more accurate measurements, because up until that time, the measurements were sort of like all over the place. In the process of doing this, he was also measuring some of the courses in the Great Pyramid. And this is from his book, Pyramids and Temples of Giza. And he makes an interesting observation about the courses of the core masonry as it pertains to the pyramid's entrance. He says, after seeing the entrances of the third pyramid, the South Pyramid of Dashur, and the Pyramid of Maidum, all of which retain their casing, there seemed scarcely a question but that the rule was for the doorway of a pyramid to occupy the height of exactly 1 or 2 courses on the outside. And so he goes on to speculate that the course would be a thickness of about 37.78 inches if the passage was exactly the same as the very carefully wrought courses of the king's chamber, with which it is clearly intended to be identical. So at the time, and still to this day, like the actual entrance of the pyramid is gone, right? It's been quarried away. We don't see the entrance. It's a big hole in the side.
Right.
So he's in the passage down below, and he knows the passage measurement, but he's like, he thinks that the passage is designed to be the same vertical dimension as the courses of the king's chamber. I don't know why he thought it was clearly intentionally to be the same size, but that's what he says.
It's clear.
Yeah.
It's totally
He thought so many things were clear that I'm like, what? So anyway, he says, on measuring the thickness of the courses, it was seen that at the 19th course is a sudden increase of thickness, none being so large for 11 courses before it and 14 after it. And this especially enlarged course is of exactly the required height of the doorway. So that 19th, he's talking about the courses of core masonry. So he's in the passage and he's thinking like, how big does the entrance have to be? And he knew that the entrance hole on the outside of the pyramid would occupy exactly 1 or 2 courses of core masonry.
Okay.
And that kind of answers your question. The casing was also the same thicknesses as the core masonry, right?
Right.
So it occupies exactly 1 course. And you have to imagine the descending passageway is like this, right? And then you've got this angle. They're at different angles.
Yeah.
So he has to know, like, the height of the course is a vertical measurement.
Yeah.
But it has to match like a vertical measurement of the height of the
courses
of the descending passageway.
Oh yeah.
Because the passageway is angled in a different way, right?
Yeah. Right. So you have it has to translate into this angle.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And we'll just take a look at a diagram here. So this is a diagram from Petrie's
look
book,
at that.
Pyramids and Temples at Giza. You can see the 19th course is right here of core masonry, and he measured all these courses on this diagram. This is his illustration of roughly the thicknesses that he measured on these courses.
God, so you got to target that course.
Yes. It has to hit that course. That is a good point.
Yeah.
Because they made it a straight line. That passage is so straight.
So you have the vertical height of the passage relative to the passage itself is a different number than the vertical height of the passage relative to up.
Yes.
Okay. And so you got to make it at this specific height and then get the angle exactly right so that and build the pyramid exactly right so that it comes out so that
you don't have to make
very end of the passage hits the very top of the 18th course. Right?
Yep. And the bottom,
of the 20th.
Exactly.
Good grief.
And it's like
Holy jeez.
he realized like I think this is fascinating that he's like measuring the courses of the king's chamber. And he's like, the entrance passage is going to be exactly the same as this.
Yeah.
And he has this. So then he was like, that course is 37.79 inches. So then he runs up the pyramid measuring courses and he gets to the 19th. He's like, this is where the
entrance was.
That's awesome.
That is cool.
And then he points out, I just want to point this out actually before I go there, that this is a fascinating indication that the course thicknesses indicate something about the interior passages and chambers of the pyramid.
Yeah.
Right? Like that this course, that it's way thicker than 11 courses before it and 14 after it, is an indicator of something going on
in the interior. Yeah.
And not only that, but that course is that thickness and it matches the courses of the king's chamber.
Yeah.
So there's more than one indication.
Yeah.
So then I started thinking like, well, look at the ascending passageway. Where it meets the descending passageway, I wonder if there's maybe these two courses. I don't know how accurate this diagram is, but are there courses specifically designed for that juncture? Because like in this little
I see it.
thing here, you would have to have this block
right
like that. Now I know that they made angled blocks of these passageways so that there actually is a much bigger structure inside there because the blocks themselves of the passage are angled with the passage.
Yeah. That's what the lines are that are sticking out.
Yeah, he's showing the lines there.
Yeah.
So, but I just wondered about this when you now have to split off of that and go up.
Yeah.
Maybe they would have done something about that in the courses. I don't know. That's just a question I have. But let's look at the larger map here. There is something else really interesting. This is much further above the entrance, but look at how thick this course is compared to everything else, right? And it goes right over the top of the Queen's Chamber roof blocks, those angled blocks there. So I wonder if that was intentional for that structure.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not sure how accurate Petrie's drawing is to the actual course thicknesses. I don't think anybody really knows.
Yeah, I wonder if he did this to scale or attempted to put these lines to scale.
Based on the other drawings and diagrams that he drew, I would say yes. I'm pretty sure he tried to do this to scale. That's my guess.
Oh, look, he draws the shafts going all the way out, though.
Yeah. So I would point this out. These are he talked about the carefully wrought courses of the King's Chamber. Now I have a question. Is he talking about the granite blocks in the King's Chamber? You can see those drawn there, how they're like very similar to the thickness of the entrance passage down there.
Yeah.
So maybe he was talking about the granite blocks in the King's Chamber. But again, there's this chunk of very similar thickness core masonry all in line with the King's Chamber.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, is there a correlation? So I looked into it and I found this paper. This is the only paper I could find or anything really about pyramid courses. This is the title of the paper. It's from the Nexus Journal of Architecture and Mathematics.
Nice.
It's titled The Course Thicknesses of the Great Pyramid by Douglas McKenzie.
I wonder if we can talk to this guy.
Well, yeah. Well, let's see if we want to talk to him after this. We can definitely talk to him. So he says, Egyptologists generally consider that the different course thicknesses are adequately explained by the various thicknesses of stone available from the quarries. We will show, however, that when accurate estimates are made of the course thicknesses, simple patterns emerge that cannot be explained just by the availability of stone. So that's interesting. The Egyptologists think that the thicknesses were based on the quarries. So like with limestone, and we'll see some of this later in the show, there's like crappy layers and then suddenly really good layers of like nice stone.
Yeah.
So they can quarry this certain layer of a certain thickness for a while. And then they'll find another layer of a different thickness, and they'll quarry that. So this is what the courses all change just randomly based on the stone coming from the quarry. So they're like, mine that level as much as you can, right? So
Yeah.
it's just silly to me.
That is silly.
Because they're like, the giant first course, it was like they mined that layer the whole time. No, the second course, they couldn't get as much, so it got smaller. And that's actually what made it a pyramid. It's just, but I kind of see what they were getting at, right? They're like, it's just the thicknesses they were getting.
The thicknesses of the courses, right? Yeah. So
but they're wrong.
How thick is course number 275 going to be? Well, let's see what we got from the quarry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, that's not how you build a pyramid.
Yeah. So anyway, if you would like to get a hold of Douglas, his email is actually right there.
Okay.
Anybody that wants to write this guy and complain.
Doxed.
Or if you want to show up to his house, his address is right there.
Oh my God.
So, sorry, Douglas. You put it in there. So here he has a chart of all the course thicknesses, all 200 and something. But he got this data from like everybody's measurements, because nobody actually went all the way around each course of the pyramid and took measurements
checked
all the way around, right? You can imagine, like, measure the courses. You get one stone, you jump up, you measure the stone right above that one, you go up, you measure the stone. That's what Petrie did. Other guys measured a bunch of stones along a few courses to see, like, well, how much variability is in this one course, and they'd go along and get a bunch of measurements around, and then they're like, wow, it's pretty actually the same.
Yeah.
So he got all of that data, but it's like a line here, a line there, a couple of measurements over here.
Okay.
Starting from back in the 1800s.
Yeah.
No one has done a complete survey, which I think maybe the scanning
guy.
Yeah, the scanning could tell us.
Yeah, if you had a really high quality point cloud, you could
get all the
actual measurements
all the way around.
All the way around. Yeah.
But anyway, let's go back to this guy's. He does make some interesting points. So he says, in this article, we will show that it is likely that the designers planned the thicknesses. Specifically, we will show two things. First, the courses were intended to be integer multiples of the royal cubit, the palm, and the finger. And he describes what those are. The second thing we will show is that the thicknesses of the courses follow three simple patterns. We loosely use some geological terms: slopes, ramps, and flats. Slopes are characterized by a constant increment between decreasing courses. Ramps follow a slope and also have a constant increment between decreasing courses, but the increment is always smaller than the slope's increment. Flats are characterized by a sequence of courses all having the same thickness. So here he has a diagram showing you, here's a slope, right? It goes from 5 to 4 to 3. And then the next one is a ramp going from 3 to 2.5 to 2. So it's decreasing in a smaller increment.
Yeah.
And then a flat
is just 2 and 2.
Is I don't know. There. 2, 2, and 2.
Okay.
And that pattern repeats itself over and over and over in the pyramid courses as they go up. They always follow each other.
Oh, in that particular
order. A slope with large decreases, followed by a ramp with smaller decreases, followed by a flat with all the same course thickness. That's pretty cool. And again, this is from all of this varying data that he got from different measurements.
Yeah.
What are you thinking right now?
I'm looking at the numbers, trying to figure out. Okay, so the slope is decreasing by 1 each, 5, 4, 3.
Yep.
The ramp is decreasing by 0.5.
Yeah, 3, 2.5, and 2.
2, and then the flat is just 2, 2, 2.
Yeah. So in the one that they're all pointing at, the colored one, he did this weird thing where he made one block 2 colors.
Yeah,
the 3 block is both blue and yellow.
Yeah, because the 3 is the beginning of the 2.5.
Right.
And 2,
it kind of confused me. I was like, what is it? What?
Yeah.
Yeah. The last block of the slope is in the ramp.
Right.
The last block of the ramp is in the flat.
Is in the flat. Yeah. Yeah, I get it.
So that's interesting.
Yeah.
Next, he says, what do Egyptologists think about the course thicknesses? I had to highlight this because he says, occasionally someone suggests that there is a correspondence between internal elements of the pyramid and the thick courses. Yes, I just did that. We agree with Petrie, however, that, quote, the position of the remarkably thick courses do not seem to have any connection with the levels of the interior, end quote. And then he cites Petrie, 1883, page 184. So I clicked on that citation and it took me to Pyramids and Temples of Giza, page 184. And I went there and that quote is not there. And then I did a word search of the entire book and I searched whole phrases of his quote, small pieces like incredibly thick courses that he quotes. None of it came up. And I'm like, bro, not only did none of it come up, it's not actually in the book that he cited.
Yeah.
But Petrie clearly makes a connection between the entrance passage and the thickness of that course. Now, I made the other ones, but Petrie clearly makes that connection. And then he also, the other thing that he said is that the entrance passage is followed by a double thick, or the thinnest courses in all of the courses of the pyramid are on top of the entrance passage, but there's two of them of the same thickness. It's a double layer that is actually, when you take the two of them together, is exceptionally thick because of the giant lintel block that went over the entrance passage. It was a double thick course. So there's
thin by themselves, but double thick.
Thin. I'm sorry. Yeah. Double thin layer.
Okay.
That together was thicker than any of the other courses.
Right. Yeah.
So he at least, at minimum, makes two definite connections to the course thicknesses and the internal passageways.
I wonder if he meant to cite a different book.
I don't even understand how Petrie could say that.
Yeah.
After making that connection.
Right. I mean, maybe he had changed his mind at some point. You know, like, I don't know. I'm not trying to defend the guy.
No, hold on a second.
But I'm just trying to defend this guy.
Douglas? I'm going to email you. No, I'm not. I wonder if it was a miscitation. Maybe it was somebody else.
It could be. That could be
because Petrie is saying, like, I mean, we could go look at Maidum at the third pyramid where he clearly states, like, the entrance passage matches exactly one thickness, of course. Now, maybe the courses are all the same thickness.
Yeah. Well, in the other way, I mean, maybe this is like oblique or whatever, like not a direct connection, but he's saying that the height of the height of the descending passage or whatever is directly related to the masonry of the king's chamber. So that is
courses of the king's chamber.
Yeah. So that's a direct connection to the size of the courses and some interior thing.
Yeah.
Well, it's an indirect connection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, cool paper, Douglas. I just wish there was newer data. Like, we need to do that same study. That's really cool with the slopes, ramps, and flats. Like that he's just saying, like, no, they planned every single one of these, is what Douglas is saying.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I agree with that. So, moving on. Core masonry. It is the greatest portion of any pyramid material. It's the smallest stones, lowest quality stones. There's a lot of mortar, and there might be interior design clues. So yeah, that was actually a big rabbit hole for me. I was just like, this is going to be real quick.
So that implies that, like, you could, like we were saying, like, let's say we get a point cloud of the exterior of the Great Pyramid, or of Khafre even, or Menkaure. And then you do, like, basically a computer analysis.
Mm-hmm.
Like, known chambers, their relation to the courses.
Yeah.
Get some data that way, and then do analysis of all of the courses that don't have any known chambers and see if there's any possibilities.
That's what I'm saying. We need those scans because we know all these interior chambers.
However, you're about to talk about the superstructure.
Yeah.
And I would say that the exterior courses of the core masonry may not necessarily reflect the interior courses of the superstructure.
That's a good point. Yep.
Those lines that Petrie drew go all the way across.
Yeah.
But that may not be the case. Right?
That's a good point.
I'm trying to foreshadow a little bit here because I know where you're going.
That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, because it's not necessary that the superstructure match the core masonry layers.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll get into that.
Okay.
All right. That's where we're going. In fact, superstructure. So initially I thought this is the greatest example of superstructure ever. And when I looked into it, this is when I learned about this idea of true pyramids versus pyramids, right? There's like the true pyramid is something that was designed to be a pyramid from the start.
From the start, it was a giant triangle.
From the start, its design was to be this massive pyramid.
Okay.
Now, there was a long-standing theory called the accretion theory, where they thought like, oh, well, they just started with a small structure and they got bigger and bigger and bigger. And over the years, like kings would add another layer and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, it grows like a city.
And Petrie basically proves, after doing tons of excavations and measurements, that like, no, that's impossible. The design of certain pyramids had to have been at least a certain size. Now, maybe it got a little bit bigger later. Maybe somebody added some layers to it and made it just slightly bigger, but not very much. Because of its internal passages and chambers.
Right.
It had to be a certain size to accommodate the locations of these internal passageways. Now, maybe he's wrong about that, but it seemed like a fairly good argument to me. I didn't go into it in detail in the presentation, but I'm just going to rely on this idea that he's correct, at least in the sense that there are true pyramids. They were intentionally designed to be their current size and state, versus this pyramid of Maidum, which was originally a mastaba, and absolutely was added onto and built upon again. So the superstructure, however, remains. Like, this is essentially the superstructure of this pyramid that's revealed here. You can see the casing stones at the bottom there were the completed version of the pyramid form. It's been since stripped away, time and quarrying and whatever. And the most interesting thing I think about this particular pyramid superstructure is the fact that these blocks are finished in the superstructure. Russ and I would be like, man, what is the deal? Like, these are actually flattened. They're finished. Yeah. Most of the other superstructures we will see, actually all of them, are unfinished. Yeah. So this is looking at the finished casing stones. Would have been the pyramid angle, and then up at the finished casing stones of the superstructure there. So this is a diagram from Petrie's book. Maidum is the name of the book. And you can see what we see there in gray. That's what we can see today, is this sort of tower thing. And then the outline there would have been the completed.
That would have been a tall
That's pyramid. The same proportions as the Great Pyramid. Can you believe that? It's so freaking steep.
Yeah.
It's incredible. So what Egyptologists are saying is that this was the original design. It was a mastaba. The mastaba angle is 75 degrees. Now, I'll just point out that the ascending passageway comes out in the side of the original mastaba. Yeah. That's much different in a true pyramid. It goes way further away, where like the entrance would have been in the ground, like hundreds and hundreds of feet
away. Yeah.
And so he's like, no.
Yeah.
But this one, the entrance passage would have been in the very first iteration of the mastaba.
Yeah, I wonder how much smaller you could make the Great Pyramid before the...
Not very much. He has a diagram. It's not in the presentation.
Okay,
yeah. Not very much.
Not relative to the whole structure. But you could move it in maybe.
Well, you know where Mamun's hole is.
Yeah.
The descending passageway and the ascending passageway where they connect, that's basically at the bedrock. So you could get a little bit smaller, but you couldn't even get to the end of Mamun's hole.
Yeah. Okay. That's true.
Because the split between the descending and ascending is like literally right above the bedrock.
Right above the bedrock, yeah.
So you couldn't have made the pyramid much smaller than that, or the entrance would have been in the bedrock out here away, far
Yeah, so
away.
Mamun's hole is what, 30, 40 feet? I mean, how far do you walk?
I don't
Yeah.
know. That's, well, we don't have to measure it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so, okay, yeah. They would have added a layer to the outside. Then some other king was like, let's build some on top.
Yep.
Again, the 75-degree angle. They would have done it multiple times, and they would have ended up with something like this. And then eventually, this is what I think is so crazy. Somebody decided, let's pyramid that thing. And they made it a pyramid.
Let's make sure no one else can stack anything on top of this.
But, okay, I think this is an important point because they changed what it originally was.
Yeah.
And changed it forever. Right? Like once you turn that whole thing into this pyramid, you're not like stacking anything else on top.
Yeah.
Like you're not making a new mastaba. But the mastabas they were burying, they were doing, I don't know. It's just like, I feel like this is support for the idea that there is a much older something going on. And then there was like a period where there was this, like, let's turn it into a pyramid thing.
Yeah.
And I don't really know, but I would say the casing and the finishing of the casing and all that stuff was even part of this mastaba deal. Like they were flattening the stones of the mastaba.
Yeah.
But at some point, like this pyramid design, like, I don't know. It replaces what it was before or enshrines it in something else. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I find that interesting, and at least some bit of evidence that maybe that was going on all of these structures, that somebody came along and decided to turn whatever was there into these giant pyramids.
Yeah. And that mastaba, at least the surviving part that's up above, isn't even, it's not like it's damaged too much, right? It's pretty intact.
I mean, that's fairly well intact.
So it's not like you'd look at that and think to yourself, wow, it's falling apart. We need to encase it and preserve it, right? Like, for example, what looks like may have happened with the Valley Temple.
Yeah.
Where you're looking at it and you're like, okay, this is, the ancients made this. We revere it. It's being destroyed by the sand and the wind and maybe floods, whatever. And you're like, well, let's encase it in granite and protect it. That thing looks fairly intact.
Yeah. Yeah, it would have been awesome.
Yeah.
Like when it was finished like that,
Yeah.
Like a ziggurat or a...
It's interesting too. Are the casing stones on this one actually smaller than the courses? Some of those course blocks look much larger than the casing.
Yeah, you know what? I didn't consider that. I didn't look. But you're right. Yeah, some of them look huge.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Or maybe that's the corner.
Yeah,
Sometimes
it could be
in
the corner blocks.
The corner blocks are very large. Yeah.
That's a good point. Well, let's move on. Let's look at some other. Right. So this is superstructure from, again, the Great Pyramid satellite pyramids, right? You can see this vertical wall there. And you wouldn't end up with this very vertical wall if you were just randomly laying blocks in courses.
Yeah.
Like all the way across.
That's right.
Like that's intentional.
Yes.
And I think that was done first, right? These superstructures were built first, and then it was added to and then eventually cased.
Yeah, it's difficult to even make an argument that this was just part of making the triangle, right? That actually makes it more difficult. Like, why would you give yourself a vertical wall like that?
Yeah, I don't know.
It's weird.
But it was definitely done. That's the point here. We don't know why.
Yeah.
The fact is, a superstructure was built.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is, I had kind of put this together before I really went down the true pyramid versus not true pyramid rabbit hole. So maybe these are not true pyramids. These are the satellite pyramids of Menkaure. Clearly superstructures here. Now, I did find out that these were believed to have never been finished, these two here, but they were intended to be pyramids.
Okay.
So
but
they obviously built mastaba-like structures or superstructures first. That first one over there was finished. And I think
more pyramid-y.
It's much more pyramid-y, but even still, when it's partly destroyed, you can kind of see like doing the stair step thing. And that one, interestingly, has it has an internal chamber. I wonder if I can pause this. Well, it has an internal chamber that is a T shape, which we'll find a little bit more out about in a minute.
You could pause it if you were in the other window.
Yeah. That's right. So this is Minkara, and somebody, Al-Aziz Uthman, who was he was the Sultan of Egypt at the time in 1196, and he decided he was going to destroy all pyramids. So he started with the smallest one, let's go with pyramid number 3. And they spent like 8 months with a huge crew of workmen destroying this pyramid, and that gash right there is as far as they got before they quit.
They destroyed it.
All pyramids destroyed. But what I would like to point out here is that they ran into a vertical wall inside this true pyramid. This is a true pyramid, the Pyramid of Minkara. And yet there's this giant vertical wall inside there. So I feel like there is no doubt that there is a superstructure inside every pyramid, the true ones, the mastaba ones, whatever. So they built them first.
I wonder, you can even look at that and kind of tell. Can you go back to it?
Yeah. Where are we?
That was it right there.
Here we go.
And we're zoomed in.
Yeah, you want to see the zoom?
Yeah. I bet you that those blocks don't necessarily match up with those courses.
Oh, you might be right. Yeah. The course thicknesses?
Yeah.
Yeah, they do look different.
Yeah. Now that might be an artifact of the angle, but it would be interesting to check that.
Okay, so is it possible then, and it seems probable, that the course thicknesses would represent at least the superstructure?
Yeah.
Let's go back. Let's look at Mr. Douglas McKenzie's graph here. See the peaks of thicknesses and thin, and like they stick up?
Yeah.
Like, I wonder if those peaks represent changes in the superstructure steps.
Yep.
That would be cool. All right, we're definitely emailing Douglas. That's a good point. Okay, so
I think that this assumption that those courses go all the way through should be examined closely, given that there's a superstructure in these things.
Really good point.
Yeah.
All right, still, let's look at Minkara and Russ. This, to make Russ's point, absolutely true. You can look at the casing stones of Minkara. Kent Kawas. I'm sorry.
Kent Kawas, yeah.
This is Kent Kawas. The casing stones at the bottom definitely do not even connect to core masonry.
That's right.
So you couldn't look at those and say, well, let's measure those thicknesses and they go all the way through, because actually they just run into bedrock.
That's right.
But at the top, there's this superstructure remaining, right? These vertical walls it's clearly like its own structure. Somebody tore away the pyramid aspect of this thing, and like the superstructure remains.
Yeah. They exposed the bedrock platform and then the superstructure on top of it.
Or that maybe the superstructure is also bigger blocks, which are harder to remove.
Could be, yeah.
I don't know. Very interesting. Superstructure. We're going back to the Pyramid of Unas. Again, there's this vertical wall that I'm sure none of you even noticed before when I showed this picture. Why is it a vertical wall? And it's clearly unfinished. So, wow. Like, what were these things before the pyramid fad showed up?
Yeah. And they're not just unfinished. They look like they may have, well, it's hard to tell because people have been chopping on these things for forever.
Let's look at this one again. Okay. They are clearly have divots and, and marks because they were shaped, I believe, for the stones that went up against them. They were sort of flattened for a stone to be fitted.
That's what I'm saying.
So that's like work done during the giant triangulation of this thing.
Yeah.
But it was something else before.
Yes.
Also, look at the slots in the bedrock down there. We'll look at those more. You can see I'm not just making this up about the superstructure being sort of cut and fitted for blocks going up against it, because we see that so many times in bedrock
Yeah.
Or in other structures that were definitely cased in granite. You can tell.
Yeah, the exterior of the Valley Temple is covered in these geometric shapes.
Yeah.
That used to have granite.
Yeah.
Cased into it.
Yeah. So, superstructure. There's a definite difference between the accretion style of pyramids and true pyramids, right? Superstructures of accretion style pyramids were mastabas, so they're not mysterious necessarily. Like the superstructures of true pyramids, right? They're very different.
Okay.
And maybe since we know like the mastabas were built like the step pyramid I didn't even mention was a mastaba. It was,
Stacked.
they just kept adding to it, and then you can even tell because it's sort of offset. It's off to one side of its chambers. It was supposed to be like this big, and they kept adding stuff to one end. It's rectangular, so. Anyway, where was I going with that? The superstructure aspect is possibly different for accretion pyramids versus true pyramids.
Okay, yeah.
The superstructure of true pyramids is very mysterious. What was it if it wasn't mastabas?
Right.
It was something else, and possibly much older. I'm hoping.
Yeah.
Was it a design feature? I think so. Of true pyramids. It definitely, well, I put a question mark there. Does it suggest multiple building phases? Hell yes.
Yeah. Yep.
I think there's no doubt. It's they built this superstructure, it was, a tower.
The accretion thing for mastaba, I mean, that's definitely
multiple building
phases in the standard model. So yes, multiple building phases. Yeah.
So then, I mean, this just brings about a lot of questions to me. There's 4 of them, or 3 of them. Was casing a later phase? Like, was it something
done much later by different people?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Bedrock shaping, the final segment. The final element. So here we are at...
Is it the 5th element?
You know what? I think you're right. It might be the 5th element. We're at Abu Rawash. We're down in the pit here. And just look at the bedrock. There's some actual masonry right there of cut stones. That's, silica rich. There's granite. You can see they were fitting granite and limestone up against the walls of this
bedrock.
And the bedrock is just fractured. It's shattered. It's chalk. It's many different layers of stuff. It's fallen apart. It's total crap. Like, it's fine for a shaft and a vertical wall, but it's clear that they didn't want a tunnel inside this thing.
Yeah.
And I can see why. Now, this is masonry, and it's shattered as well, but it's very hard. You can tell the quality of stone is high. It's been destroyed. So here's this sloping passageway, this what I'm calling sort of a trench, and you can see the sloping blocks. The blocks that they're casing this trench with are also sloped at the same angle of the trench. It has long been believed that this pyramid was incomplete. It was never completed. And now there is a consensus amongst Egyptologists and archaeologists that it actually was completed.
And it's been just totally dismantled.
It's been totally dismantled, which is mind-blowing. Like
wild.
The story of the Sultan, who for 8 months just barely cut a little gash. Who took this apart?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so when we were discussing this, you had a really good point on why you think it was obviously completed. Because there's finished casing stones on the outside.
That's right.
With not just put up against it, but also flattened in the slope. Like, you don't do that unless you're at the end of the job, right? You don't put casing stones on the damn thing unless it's basically done. So I had my doubts.
Casing is definitely the last step.
Yeah. I had my doubts about this, and then you pointed that out. I was like, okay, I buy it.
Yeah.
Like, you're right. That's the last thing you do.
They also believe that this pyramid was built at the same time as Menkaure. And the reason I pointed out that one true satellite pyramid of Menkaure, the one that was completed, has a T-shaped chamber inside. Abu Rawash. This big, giant T-shaped chamber. Now, when this was completed, you would have no idea that this massive cut was in the bedrock. You wouldn't see the bedrock. The bedrock's completely covered by a pyramid. You go into the entrance. It's a tiny little 3 foot by 3 foot shaft. You go down. It's all you see is masonry.
Yeah.
You go all the way to the bottom and it's all masonry. You're in the bottom. You're in the subterranean chamber. You are in subterranean chamber, but it's all masonry. You would have no idea. And there could be passages above you and around you, all up in this trench.
Yeah.
And above the chambers, there could have been other huge chambers up in there.
Yeah.
You would never know.
Yeah. You'd go down this thing and get to the bottom and it opens up into this massive high corbelled ceiling and you'd be like, oh, wow. Right. But you wouldn't know that it's actually a structure built inside this shaft.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. This is a really awesome place. This place blew my mind. It really opened my mind up to. So let's go up above it. I mean, look at, this is just insane. There's fitted blocks on the left side.
Sticking out over the...
and there's some of them are still overhanging this giant shaft. And I believe the whole shaft was cased at one point.
Oh, yeah.
It's possible that they left a large central shaft, but I don't think this giant T shape would have been completely exposed. I think they cased the entire thing. And the casing was very good stone, which is why it was all taken. And I'm actually standing on top of like way up higher than the base of the pyramid. This is...
Yeah, on rubble on top of there. Because the whole thing is set into a...
Yeah, why didn't I put this in bedrock shaping? I just was supposed to put this... Oh, wait, this is bedrock shaping.
Yeah, we're in bedrock shaping, yeah.
Look at me, I don't even know where I'm at.
We're on the fifth element. Yeah, so this whole thing is set into a similar to Kintkawas, right? There's an amount of... when you come up, there's a flat area and the bedrock is sticking up. Like they carved it out and then they've cut this trench into it.
Yeah.
So they have this nub or primordial mound of bedrock.
That's the primordial mound part. I've heard this phrase, the primordial mound, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, what is that? And then when we get up here and I'm just like, oh yeah, that's it.
Yeah. God, look at that. Yeah, that's an excellent
This thing is huge. Yeah. So all these stones on the right here, that's masonry. It's broken, like it's very glassy, breaks. But just look at it. It's all chalky. The bedrock's crap. You wouldn't want to tunnel through that, basically. So yeah, I was hoping I had a video of the exterior. Maybe I do later. I don't know, but let's move on.
Okay.
So this is a diagram of the subterranean chambers and passageways of the step pyramid at Saqqara. And this is what it made me think of when we were down there in Abu Rawash. Here's this giant central shaft. And then there's the granite, multi-piece granite box in the bottom. And there's this giant stairway going all the way down. Now this stairway has basically been filled in at this point, so we have to go in through the outer tunnels way up there and climb through all these weird tunnels to get down into this chamber. But originally, it was this long stairway going down. Now those other tunnels were cut by who? I don't know, but whoever it was, they weren't using the original stairway going down, right? That's interesting. So I'm basically suggesting here that this stairway was a big trench cut down into this central chamber.
Where's the level of the ground level here? Like at the top of the narrow part of the shaft, roughly?
Or at
the top of the stairway?
Yeah, I would say at the top of the shaft there, because that's the base of the pyramid. You can see where they have it labeled as retaining walls.
Yeah.
I did not. This is not my text on this diagram.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's got to be retaining walls for the pyramid masonry or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I would assume you can see the pyramid masonry when you look up from down in this shaft, and we'll see some of that. But what I'm suggesting is there's this big trench cut with the slope going down, and they run into a hard layer of bedrock. You know, maybe they had cut the shaft already. I don't know. I would imagine they cut the trench while cutting the shaft. So they hit this hard layer of bedrock way down there, and they go through that, and that's what they make. Underneath that hard layer, they build the chamber for the box, and then they cut all the tunnels, because that hard layer of bedrock is the roof structure that they can cut chambers and tunnels underneath all day. No big deal. They also ran into a hard layer of limestone, like somewhere there in the trench. And so they didn't actually dig out any of the material above that. They left that there. So now the trench itself has sort of a roof over it, a ceiling. So this is Russ's. I've never been here, but Russ went to this is the Persian entrance.
Yeah, the Persian tunnel, yeah.
So there's the central shaft of that we were just looking at the diagram of. Boom. That is fantastic. God. What is that? Anyways, we don't know. It's a giant multi-piece granite box. But from this picture, you can see there's the hard limestone layer that they ran into. And if you look at the limestone above it,
yeah,
it's just all garbled and chunky.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm sorry. That layer right there is solid, right? Very solid. And then you can see this shaft over here that's been filled in with rubble.
The trench.
Or the trench.
Yeah.
It's been filled in with rubble. Here we're looking at it from the bottom up. So you're down looking up, and at the very, very top of the trench, you can see some of the pyramid masonry. Maybe that's what they're calling the retaining wall.
The retaining walls, yeah.
In any case, there's the hard limestone layer at the top. When they left that as the roof structure over their trench. There's the hard limestone layer at the bottom, and the infilled trench area.
Stairs, yeah.
Which would have been the stairway.
Man, that's interesting.
So this is basically the same methodology of Abu Awash. Abu Awash just didn't have
a hard layer to leave a roof over the
It was
trench.
all shit.
Yeah.
It was still a primordial mound, right? Like it was this giant peak of limestone, and they cut it into thing, and they cut a trench and a shaft and whatever, built the pyramid on it.
They cut the trench all the way down. They're like, this primordial mound is shit.
I know, I'm trashing their primordial mound. Okay, so the other thing that we did on this trip, this last trip, was we went to what we were calling the southern shaft. It's called the Southern Tomb. When I looked it up, look up Southern Tomb of Saqqara. So it's basically the same thing, but there's nothing there but a pit. There's no pyramid. Now, they show in the diagram that there was a mastaba structure over top. It's no longer there. The pit's open to the air.
Yeah.
It's open to the sky.
And the mastaba was this long structure they're
long
showing here.
Rectangular
that went
structure.
all the way to the beginning of the stairs.
Yeah, so this is what I'm getting at, folks. Like, are these things necessarily connected?
Yeah.
Like, is the mastaba the same people that
did the
dug
shaft
that
and
shaft?
all the tunnels and built the boxes. Right.
I don't know. Very interesting. Not sure. If you can have a true pyramid that's not a mastaba, why does it have like a similar interior subterranean structure, like all the same stuff, but there's no mastaba?
Yeah.
I don't know. Or maybe they just thought like mastabas went out of style and now we need giant triangles. I don't know. Anyway, let's look at this. This is the central shaft here in blue. There's the multi-piece granite box in the bottom. And there's your trench. I don't know how they drew this stairway. It didn't make any sense to me. So I'm just drawing my trench. This is where the trench actually is. I don't understand the diagram drawer stairway going Is that inside? I couldn't figure it out. I was like, whatever, I'm drawing my trench. So there's my
Yeah,
trench.
the shaft just doesn't actually connect to the bottom of the mastabas.
I don't know what's going on.
The mastaba's a spaceship. It's floating over.
Yeah. So anyway, they ran into a hard limestone layer. Now, look, this is Saqqara. This is right next door
next to this. Yeah.
to the step pyramid. So of course it's got the same bedrock features. So they would have been familiar with this. Yeah, it's trenched down. We also have a hard limestone layer up here, so we won't actually need to dig that out. We can trench underneath it. And then, here's a video of us going down. There's a lot of reconstruction in here, I'm sure, to keep the crappy bedrock from falling in, but the hard limestone layer at the bottom doesn't have any, right? It's hard. There's the multi-piece granite box. So, but there's no pyramid above this thing.
Yeah, it's open to the sky.
There's no mastaba. Was the mastaba completely removed? I don't really know, folks. I don't know the answers to these questions.
Yeah, it's open to the sky. I guess there could have been a mastaba. That's a good question.
In the diagram, there was one, but I didn't really read much about it. I was just seeing this pattern, right? And I'm thinking, like, this is pyramid. This is a pyramid. You know, if we're going to call incomplete pyramids, then this is a freaking pyramid right here.
Is that some of the harder limestone up there?
Yeah.
The top of the stairs?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I see it.
And look, it's all been filled back in, the trench. And there's this giant mysterious thing down here.
Yeah. What's the box for?
No idea. So yeah.
Oh, there.
Looking up,
there it is.
There's our hard layer of limestone at the top, and I think the masonry above that is just the antiquities department putting a wall up so people won't fall in this hole. I don't know what that is. That might be a retaining wall. That could be a retaining wall to keep sand out and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's probably who knows what. But anyway, this giant hard layer right there of good solid limestone acts as a roof over the trench. And there is the infill, like they obviously, I don't know if this is modern or ancient, but it's definitely been filled back in, this trench that goes all the way down to the hard limestone layer at the bottom. So this is a feature, at least of mastaba pyramids, or not true pyramids. But I mean, it matches everything that we know about, you know, the Great Pyramid as well. This sort of subterranean chamber thing.
Yeah.
We'll get to it. So let's go back to my doom. So we've got this descending passageway. And so what I'm suggesting here is that at my doom, they cut a shaft, and then they also cut a trench to that shaft.
Yeah.
And then they filled this all back in with masonry. So, and maybe that shaft also was cut more like the other ones and filled back in. I don't think so, because you can actually see some bedrock in this area when you're climbing up, and I'll show that in this next video. So this is Russ and I going down. We have multiple videos of us going down this descending passageway, and we're looking at masonry because it's like this descending passageway is it's flaking apart. It's falling apart. There's literally calcite crystal growing between the joins of the stone, which we're marveling at in the audio of this video. We're just like, what is going on? Every joint is filled with calcite crystal growth. This thing is just so ancient. It's crazy. That's all calcite crystal growth on the, and that may be why some of the stone is spalling off, because of the inconsistency of it. I don't know. But the fact that it's growing in the joints between the stones is like,
yeah,
those are really old. So it's masonry all the way down. And I have another video of us going down here with Ben, and we're all like, wait, are we in the bedrock? I think we're in, like, I'm not sure if we're in the bedrock. Well, maybe the bedrock's here. We were definitely in the bedrock. We're actually in the bedrock at this point. So this is just a cool feature. There's this fossil up at the top right here.
Yeah.
They clearly split the stone into two stones and use one on one side and the other one on the other. That's the same exact fossil.
Yeah. Explain that, geopolymer people.
And it's flint. It's basically been turned to flint. So look, it's masonry. It's clearly masonry.
Yeah.
So this is high silica content limestone. Lots of silica in this limestone, which is why
That's
it breaks
bedrock at the
glass.
bottom, right?
That's possibly bedrock.
Yeah,
That could
possibly.
be a giant tile.
You're right.
I don't know.
Could be.
But look, we're in the bedrock. It's all masonry. The ceiling, the walls, the floor may be bedrock, but I don't think so.
Yeah, there's the growth.
Yeah, weird crystal growth in the joints. So yeah, we're way underground. And now I'm going up the small shaft that was in the diagram there, and look at the actual bedrock. This is what they were dealing with. This is the material that they were having to deal with at My Doom. And I think this is probably why My Doom fell apart. Because it's total crap. It's just dirt.
Yep.
It's like gravel it's like sort of gravelly, sort of hard clay gravel stuff inside like a matrix of, we call it caliche.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not good rock.
It's almost not rock.
So it's probably why the My Doom pyramid part actually fell apart, because the bedrock is just crap. I'm sorry about the camera. I didn't know I was going to be publishing this, guys. I was just looking at...
Assume you're going to publish everything.
I know. I got to get better. So I just thought that was really cool. It's like, you can see the diagram. It clearly goes into the subterranean structure and all that. And it's like, no, they cut this big trench. They completely cased it because the bedrock was crap. That's one thing it tells us about the builders too. They knew their materials.
Yeah.
They knew, like, we're not going to tunnel.
They were
in this
good
crap.
engineers, and they had good, like, what do you call it? Like, you got to test the material. When you're using something like bedrock, like existing stuff, you need to know the quality before you put a giant triangle on top of it.
So the first stage, obviously, is the bedrock shaping. They're going to they're going to cut huge trenches. They're going to cut huge shafts into it.
Yeah.
And they're going to, or they've already done it on the site multiple times. They're like, we know exactly what to do.
Yeah.
So it's possible that the southern shaft is a trial passage, or that the trial passages on Giza literally are that.
Yeah.
Like, let's cut the shit down into the bedrock and see. I don't think that's what it is. I think maybe the trial passages might have been another pyramid.
Yeah.
I didn't put that in that's not in this presentation. But let's go to Giza. So here on the right is the diagram I spoke of earlier that's cut in half.
It's almost not there.
That's showing you how far the actual casing goes. Now, obviously, it's exaggerated in the drawing, but he's got the measurements are different. It goes deeper in one side than the other.
Okay.
But they tiled over it, so it's all flat. Interesting. But I cut this to look at the other diagram on the left. So in Giza, all of the bedrock is awesome. It's really good material. That's why Giza is full of tunnels. There's tunnels, there's shafts, everything is tunnel. There's chambers, you know, the Osiris shaft, the chambers that you could see in the Osiris shaft. You climb down, down, down. Then suddenly you get to this really nice, thick layer of good solid bedrock, and they cut a big chamber.
Yeah.
And then there's another shaft going down.
Yeah. Find the next
one. Really cool stuff. So here is the bedrock under the Great Pyramid. And as you can see, it actually starts like just below the joint of the descending and ascending passageways, which I think is interesting. There's the well shaft up there, and the well is just beneath the bedrock layer. So the primordial mound is essentially this rise in the bedrock right here on the Giza Plateau that they built this pyramid on top of.
So I wonder, now this is going to be some wild speculation here.
Okay.
But I'm thinking of Kinkawas and Abu Awash. Let's say that this pyramid had been completely dismantled like those were.
Yeah.
And what if all that was left was basically a bedrock mound with a bit of superstructure that basically goes up to the bottom of the Queen's chamber there, and the well shaft is going alongside the wall of the interior, structure or whatever. Yeah, that sticks up off the bedrock.
That'd be cool. That would be really cool.
Yeah, it's like that well shaft, because I don't know. I'm just thinking of it, like, how much smaller would it be? It would just be some like 14 courses of straight blocks sticking up on top of this bedrock platform. just like those other ones. And there you couldn't even imagine the scale
Yeah.
of the thing.
You know, it's making me
There
think
would be a hole in the bedrock over there where the descending passage is.
was the well shaft the initial descending passageway?
Yeah.
Right? They're like, let's cut down, and they get to a hard layer, and they're like, okay, we can build a chamber in here.
Yeah.
And they cut that subterranean chamber.
It definitely seems like the well shaft, they were concerned with those fractures.
Maybe so. Yeah. They passed the fissures.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's not what this is about.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
What this is about, well, I was going to point out that the bedrock was underneath that. Forgot about that. What this is about is the fact that they did not cut a giant shaft over the subterranean chamber because the bedrock is so good. They did not cut a giant trench, ramp, and case it. No, they were able to tunnel directly into this bedrock. There is no masonry. Once you get below the bedrock level, the actual bedrock level, they didn't need it.
Yeah. And that bedrock is good. It's hard stone and it's high quality.
Yeah, you could see how even the cased stones in under my doom were just falling apart.
Yeah.
Falling off. Like maybe they didn't pick the best material.
Yeah.
You know? They were like, wow, this stone's really hard. Let's use it. But maybe it was had a whole bunch of
Microfractures that started filling up with crystals.
Yeah. I don't know. Or maybe those inclusions were already there, and that's why it's falling apart.
Could be, yeah.
But yeah, it's the same design as Abu Rawash. It's the same design as the step pyramid. It's just they were dealing with different natural materials in the primordial mound. I knew I should trust myself. This is Abu Rawash. This is the exterior of Abu Rawash. And you can see there's some stones set against this, but most of what you're looking at is bedrock. And you can see the tilt. The casing stones are actually tilted in towards the structure, and they're all gone almost.
Almost all of them are gone.
There's a few that you can find granite that case this pyramid in. But look at the bedrock. I mean, it's just
terrible.
It's tilted. It's sloping all over in different ways. It's chalky. It's crumbling. It's I mean, it's heavily fractured everywhere. Vertical fissures and fractures all in the sedimentary layers. So yeah, they sort of roughly shaped it into this stair-step shape, and then they cased it. They put core masonry up against some of it, and then they cased that. So again, we look at Kent Kawas, trying to get rid of us. There you can see this is all bedrock here. Some of it's cased, but look at these are these sort of vertical carved impressions in the bedrock there. That was where they were fitting stones up against it.
The marbling in that.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. And this is Giza. So
yeah, this is what they're dealing with.
Yeah.
So again, like this area right here at Kent Kawas was like a yardang, like what they said that the Sphinx was.
Yeah.
So they carved this protrusion in the bedrock that sticks up, because the bedrock is all sloping down towards the river. We're almost at the end there, like where those people are in the buildings. That's like the lowest level, but then there's this giant protrusion, and they cut it into a pyramid. So this is the primordial mound. I love that.
Yeah.
So now we're at Khafre, and you can see the bedrock on the right there. And that bedrock actually is part of Khafre. Now this is a wide angle, so the pyramid's all distorted.
That's a great illustration right there.
Yeah, it's roughly 4 or 5 courses of the pyramid. And I don't know how far down it goes, like towards the end there, but it definitely on this end, I think maybe there's more core masonry up against it. On the other side, you don't see it so much. And of course, the bedrock is sloping down as you go away.
Down in that direction, so it's going down slowly. It's like
down a few courses.
I would love to find out where each course of bedrock ends as it's going down. I bet you could figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think by the time you get all the way to that corner, it's basically corner blocks. It's not bedrock, right?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead here.
That's okay.
This is
It's your presentation.
This is actually the bedrock on the exterior of the Great Pyramid. And there's gigantic, beautiful fossils that you can see in there in this geopolymer, where they were like, let's grab like 1 billion fossils and like make a geopolymer gigantic corner of the pyramid out of it. So there's a block fitted up against it. Now there's more of it. That's bedrock down there. And there's a huge fossil Russ just stepped on. Giant shell. Sorry. This is all bedrock. All bedrock. He's pointing it out there. It's just coming up. They've stair-step cut it. And this rock that they left is basically flint. It's pure flint.
Yeah, look at that.
And it's got this beautiful patina on it, which you pointed out in the video, but I muted you so that I could have it. It's got a beautiful patina, folks. But yeah, it's like filled with marine fossils that actually make up a lot of the sort of roundish shapes of it. And there's this fissure in it, this natural fissure. But yeah, it's almost entirely flint, or at least a really high silica chert. That's a block that they fitted up against it. So like they cut it away where maybe it was getting really fractured there. They cut that part out because it's like, it's kind of shattered. And then they fit this beautiful tile or core masonry block. But then we were like, wow, look at this core masonry is almost all flint or chert. And you were pointing out the patina on the top there too. But I had not really noticed this before, this whole area of this corner of the pyramid, until this trip. It was like, we had kind of looked at it. Wow, this is weird. But the other thing I think is fascinating about it is that it's the northeast corner. And in the Masonic tradition, the building begins at the northeast corner. The northeast is the darkest corner of every building. And so in their tradition, they begin at the northeast and they build towards the southwest, which becomes, the southwest is like the brightest corner. So the building emerges from darkness to light. And
in the northern hemisphere.
It's true.
I'm just gonna,
the Masons didn't bother with the southern hemisphere. But that's a really good point. That's funny. I just think that's fascinating to think of this idea of the primordial mound of the Great Pyramid is still there in the northeast corner of the building. Like that's where they began, like this gigantic protrusion of flint coming out of the bedrock. And they're like, they start cutting.
They're like, keep this.
We're keeping this. It's the cornerstone of this monument.
That's amazing.
And it is part of the primordial mound itself. So I'm just going around and it you keep seeing more of it, but it's, they cased it in many places. I have a scan of it too, but it's not that great. Anyway, fantastic. So bedrock shaping. So it has to be the first consideration in design, which is what you were saying. Like they have to go, in order to engineer this thing, they have to test the material that they're building upon.
Yeah. Just like, with modern buildings is what we do. You check the ground, you do
core,
like density checks and everything. Sometimes and depending on where you are, they'll say, well, you need pylons this deep because your building's going to be tall, whatever. You have engineers that look it over and then they come back and they say, you need this much concrete, you need this, right? And the whole slab, the concrete slab, your foundation is based on first doing an in-depth check of the ground that you're planning to build on.
Yeah.
They'll tell you either need to stack material up or you need to dig down, whatever it is.
Yep.
You have to prep the site before you put a building up. And they did the same thing. They clearly were doing the same thing with the pyramids.
Yeah. And they had to know the design of the chambers inside, right? Like they clearly had like, here's going to be the angle of descent of the descending passageway. Here's going to be how big the subterranean chamber is, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then they would go out and they would start digging and then they would find out whatever material it was that they were dealing with. And then that would determine like, well, we need to make the trench wider because it's crappy material. Well, maybe they start with a tunnel and they're just like, that's no good.
Yeah.
Trench it until you get to good material.
Yeah.
So in the case at Saqqara, they hit good material, they tunneled.
Yeah.
Then they almost immediately hit crappy material and they turned it back into a trench, leaving
With
the
a
hard
roof.
material as a roof.
Yeah.
So they're just working with the stone as they go and determining its actual engineering as they dig, but with a design in mind. You know, how big is the subterranean chamber? All of that sort of thing. How far do they have to go? How big is the structure on top?
So it's like
fascinating.
It's like a design and also a process.
It's a process. And yes.
So they're like, here's what we basically want. And then here's our process to figure out how we can get that at the site we chose.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it the primordial mound? I think that's exactly what it is. I think that it's like when you find a home site, right? You come to a place and you're like, oh, this is where we're building the house.
Yeah.
Right? That land was sacred. There was something about it that was like sacred. So I put it as a question mark, but I think that the bedrock, whatever the features of that bedrock, whether it was a protrusion or like in the case of Abu Rawash, it's the northernmost. It was the highest pyramid ever built. There was this giant protrusion of bedrock at the top of this hill. For whatever reason, trench it, shaft it, pyramid it. Whatever, dude. So yeah, like we said, it's the first step in building. You have to go cut this bedrock. It includes the consideration of the internal chambers and passages. And then
in many of the pyramids, it is all
the internal, well, all that we know of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Until Scan Pyramids completes their project.
The Great Pyramid has, and you know, I guess the Step Pyramid's shaft and the Bent Pyramid has chambers and stuff in the body.
In
of
the actual
pyramid.
masonry.
But a lot of the pyramids, you basically go down into the bedrock immediately.
Yeah. And you know, you can think of it like at my doom that you're not in the bedrock. You're actually in part of the built structure. Like
That's true.
Because they made this huge thing and then they closed it in with all this.
Yeah. It's underground.
It's fascinating. Yeah. It's
right.
subterranean.
Yeah.
So the rock determines the design. Absolutely. Especially, in some cases, it deals with like how big can your ceiling be, and in the King's Chamber, for example, the type of rock you're dealing with, but definitely in the bedrock. Is it rock cut like the Great Pyramid descending passageway and subterranean chamber, which was never completed, by the way, which is very interesting. That's the first thing you do.
What do you mean?
The first thing you do is dig the subterranean parts of the pyramid.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
Because that I'm sorry, I'm going backwards here, but that descending passageway where it meets the bedrock is way inside the outside of the pyramid. It comes through the masonry.
Yeah.
So they dug that first. And they never finished the subterranean chamber and started pyramiding it.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Well, now that we've gone through this, I can easily see that the subterranean chamber may have been cased.
Absolutely.
But it would have been way smaller.
It would have been a very strange structure.
And it also has a shaft at the bottom of it.
It also has weird stuff in the ceiling and walls. And
there's like, it goes up and then there's two strange walls that don't quite reach all the way to the ceiling. It's a really weird chamber. And then the shaft that has a shaft in the bottom of it. There's a well, and in the bottom of the well, there's a hole.
Yeah.
It's like really strange.
You're right. It could have been cased. It would be insane to imagine someone quarrying the casing and dragging it up that 300 foot long or 600 foot long ascending passageway and taking it out of there.
But if it was all like jade or something, then somebody definitely would have done it.
That's a good point. Could have been gold.
It could have been cased in gold. Holy crap.
Okay, so the rock determines the design, and I think the big question for me was the bedrock aspects of all of these things much older? Not just like, obviously it was the first thing that was done in the design, but could it be that these these primordial mounds with their shaping and subterranean aspects, could they be a much older something that later people came and built on top of, built their mastabas on top of, and later started building pyramids on top of? Or they built mastabas, then they built superstructures, and then the superstructures were then turned into pyramids. You see what I'm saying? There's something going on here. So I think that it seems like it's multiple phases of different builders, and obviously the bedrock was first. So maybe this is what this primordial mound idea. There was more than just a natural hill, but it was something that the hands of humans had already done something with, something significant, which caused this sort of culture to spring around, like the encasing of all of it to preserve it or whatever. I don't know. Enshrine it. Put your loved ones in there, or the exalted ones, or whatever, the burial aspect of it, which doesn't seem to be even original to the pyramids in terms of Egyptology. Like they have not found original burials, know.
And it's also interesting that all of this basically took place in the early parts of the Old Kingdom, right? All of this pyramid building is in a relatively short period of Egypt's whole history.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
It according to the standard model, it begins and then stops fairly quickly. Think of all the stuff that we've looked at. All of the work that is entailed in this, it's all encompassed in a very short period of time, if that story is correct.
Right.
If they built everything.
But if all they had to do was like add some core masonry, and then
put their own touches onto it, and then they weren't burying themselves in it, but they were venerating something older,
right?
Or maybe they discovered things there, and it was teaching them how to become this more powerful civilization.
Is it possible even that Menkaure was an attempt by the dynastic Egyptians to case and complete one of the pyramids, and they try to do it in granite and just gave up, flattened a few spots, and were just like, no.
This is way too hard. It could be. I don't know.
I don't know either. I trap myself, right? I'm like, maybe there was like a dynastic Egyptian period of like pyramid everything.
Yeah.
Pyramid all these superstructures and all these like bedrock shaped holes and primordial mounds, but then like, well, what about Menkaure? What about the casing of Menkaure? Like that's weird.
And Maidum collapsed for a reason. Whoever did that pyramiding clearly didn't do their homework on the bedrock.
Yeah, it fell apart. And they say, I think Petrie or somebody that I was reading says that it was the bedrock.
Yeah.
It just wasn't prepared properly or whatever. Like they should have dug it out and put gigantic freaking tiles.
Yeah. Which was done on quite a few of these pyramid sites.
Yeah.
So that's the question. Like, how far back do these structures actually go at their outset, right? What was the primordial mound? Why is it a primordial mound?
Yeah.
Is it that later peoples, and the later peoples may even be much older than the dynastics, show up and see something that's so ancient, just like just imagine there's just tiny remnants of something that was built there a long time ago, and these people show up and they're like, whoa, why were they building here? Yeah. Who even were these people? And then they start to venerate it, and then the dynastics eventually venerate that.
Yeah.
So you have multiple, and like in Peru, you see what looks like multiple stages of construction by people different people that
skills and
that had a long time between them in some cases.
Mm-hmm.
So you show up and it's already in ruins. And then you and you're just like, this is a place of the ancients, and this is where we will stay, and we will learn, and we will build.
Yeah. I love that idea. So again, to wrap it up, I think that this is the way to gain insight, is to observe all of these features, and from them deduce the process. And from the process, we can possibly deduce what the purpose was or what the ideas behind it were. And from that, maybe someday understand why
they did it.
Yeah.
Fantastic, man.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
All right.
Well done. That was a perfect ending. But I also want
not over yet.
I want to say that going through all of this and looking at the skill
Oh, yeah.
and the engineering, like the architectural understanding, the engineering understanding, the geological concepts, right? Maybe they didn't, we don't have to assume that they know how sedimentary rock was formed or whatever, but they aren't stupid and they're digging through it and they're finding shells, right? So you have to assume that they're like, this is an ancient ocean. At some point it was an ocean, right? Anyway, the point is that you can imagine that the knowledge base of the people that were doing this kind of stuff is enormous.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't really fit the concept of somebody whose tool set is bone, copper, and flint.
Yeah. Yep. I agree.
All right.
Say some more stuff.
I do think that we'll find out eventually that some of this stuff is very, very old.
I also think there's a few, at least one area where we can actually learn a great deal with modern technology, and that will be the course studies.
Yes.
And we can figure that out with scanning technology.
Yeah.
With drones that can scan whatever. We can scan the outsides of the entire pyramid and then use AI or whatever to analyze all the courses, everything that's exposed, and determine the course thicknesses. And then from all of the information from the Scan Pyramids Project interiors, we might learn more about the interior structure and see if there's actually connections.
Yes.
And that would be
all
amazing.
right. So that's future research.
Yeah. That was what I was waiting for.
Oh,
there we go.
Awesome, man.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Wow. Is that calorie sitting on top of the...
No, bro, that's me and you.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. I'm the one with the swords.
That's right. Yeah.
If we found that pyramid, we would get all the answers.
That's the one we need.
First, that one. It's in Antarctica or something. Yeah, man, fantastic. That's a really excellent presentation. The study of what they were doing and basically, and how they did it, or what they were actually building will lead to better questions on it.
Yeah.
On how they did it. I'm not sure about why.
Yeah.
But maybe.
Well, the point is that
you got to ask the right question.
How can lead to why.
Yes, that's true.
What, in other words, there's clear evidence of what they did.
Yeah.
Right. The more of that we learn can give you clues about how, but maybe not. You might not even figure out, like, how did they move the giant stones? There's not necessarily any clues, but there might be.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. It's like there's evidence they moved them.
Mm-hmm.
Not a whole lot of clues on how. So all we can do is argue back and forth on, like, if we're pouring water on the sand.
But what was done can be, like, definite.
Yeah.
That's why I like it so much.
Yeah. That's true. That's interesting, because now we're going back to the very first time we talked about pyramids, and you were like, "Well, clearly they did it. They're there."
Yeah. Yep. They absolutely.
So you're going all the way back to that. Like, okay, they're there. Let's look at what's there.
But back then, I was thinking, like, pyramids are
Yeah.
giant triangles.
That's true. Yeah.
Like I would have looked at my doom and just been like, well, are we going to look at pyramids or what? Lahoon?
Yeah. You showed me a pile of mud.
So I hope that's what I wanted to do. And, I think that I hope people enjoy or appreciate that aspect of the presentation that there's so much more to these things, and you can look at stuff that is like the southern shaft. There's no reason why anybody would connect that to a pyramid that's just like observing like pictures or whatever.
Yeah.
Like if you haven't, so that's what I'm trying to do is bring people along with us on this process of like going through all these places and connecting the what together. Because that becomes a mystery. Like, would the southern shaft have been a pyramid at some point? Like they say it was a mastaba, blah blah blah. But so I think that's great, and I love it.
Two of the other ones that weren't in this presentation, but also have a lot of weird aspects to them, are Abu Ghurab and Abu Sir. Those structures too, and like the one is it Abu Sir that, we've been told it was supposed to have had an enormous it was a mastaba with a giant obelisk on top of it.
Yeah,
it's like the obelisk is gone.
You
no
also
sign of it.
We talked about the well. I don't remember where it was. There's so many things that I plan to keep adding more stuff to this presentation and make it just like ridiculously long. So I'm like Randall, like, let me just 300
Let me
something
pull up
slide.
417 slides.
Like, just do the whole thing. Like, it'll take days. But this well was a trench, and it was narrow. Hadn't been widened. The bedrock was fantastic.
Down
there
below.
were natural caves all over that had been cut in. And it looked like they had quarried them out.
Down below Abu Rawash, right?
Is that where it was? I don't even remember where it was.
Yeah, it's the Abu Rawash was
okay.
up on the end.
I believe you.
Yeah, okay.
The stairway goes down and you just run into water.
Yeah.
But then it was opened up or whatever.
Yeah. There you can see a huge lintel at the back, across this nasty water back there. There was structure.
I'm like, is that a pyramid too?
Yeah.
Were they beginning the process of pyramid building there? Then there was the one that you pointed out. You showed me some old pictures of from inside the military base. It's the same as Abu Rawash.
Oh, yeah.
It's on Giza, and it's a giant, long.
Yeah.
So this could
trench.
destroy the idea of like, well, it was just the bedrock, which is why they made this big wide trench. Like if there's one right there at Giza and it's the same bedrock, we need to see it.
It's on the edge of the plateau. Yeah.
It's crappy. Right.
Zawiyat El Arian, I think is what that was called.
It's a big T-shaped chamber.
Yeah. They famously used it to make a movie a while back.
It was something about like Moses or Noah. Moses movie.
Could be a Moses movie, yeah. They showed a procession of Egyptians in it, but now it's got a military base around it. You can't go in there. Looks like it's full of brush if you look at it on Google Earth.
Yeah, so there's plenty more stuff that's not included, but is totally connected. We didn't talk about the possible concrete material they were using.
Yep.
That's more stuff that's got to be added. But, this is long enough. I think we've been going for like 2 hours or so. I don't even know how long.
2 hours.
I started it a long time ago. I started it way before we started the actual show.
Yeah.
So.
Anyways, it was fantastic. Thank you very much. I'm excited to give that. We'll be giving this at the. We will have been. I always get screwed up with my tenses on the time travel.
We will have already given this at the afternoon at the museum.
Right. It's in our future, but in your past.
And if you're local and you can go to that, you should come. We got
It's too late to tell them that.
Oh yeah, that's right.
It's perfect time right now.
Cut that part out.
Time travel is hard. So yeah, we'll be doing more things like that. But this one will have been fun with Luke.
Okay. Show's over.
Yeah.
We love you.
Always have.
Always will.
Good night, Adamu.
Get back to work.